I should have known something was off when Barbara suddenly became an expert on baseball. For the entire 11 years of our marriage, the woman had about as much interest in sports as I had in vegan cheese. But a few months ago, she started casually dropping stats at dinner. "Did you see the Dodgers bullpen last night?" she'd ask, swirling her wine like some high society analyst. "Total disaster. They need to trade for another closer." At first, I thought, wow, look at my wife, finally joining the conversation. It was refreshing. Almost romantic. I pictured us on the couch, bonding over a game, maybe even high-fiving over a good play. That fantasy lasted all of one night. Because here's the thing, if Barbara was actually interested in baseball, she wouldn't be getting every single detail wrong. "They really gotta get their offense together," she'd say after a game where they'd won 9-1. Or, "The Yankees manager is such a fool," when they hadn't even played that night. I tested her once. "Yeah, you're right," I said. "And that walk-off grand slam in the 8th? Unreal." "Oh my God, I know," she agreed, eyes lighting up. I was screaming. There had been no grand slam. No 8th-inning drama. Just a routine 4-2 win. That's when it hit me, she wasn't actually watching these games. She was hearing about them. And that meant one of two things: either she had a secret life as a very confused sports journalist, or someone was feeding her this nonsense. It wasn't just baseball. Other things started shifting in strange ways. Like the fact that she suddenly had a strong opinion about craft beer. Barbara used to roll her eyes at anything that didn't come in a bottle and say light somewhere on the label. Now, she was passionately explaining the difference between a West Coast IPA and a hazy IPA. "I just love the citrusy notes," she mused one night, taking an exaggerated sniff of her glass. "Uh-huh," I said, watching her closely. She squinted at me, then leaned forward. "You don't think it's weird, do you?" "Weird? No. I just love how you're evolving as a person." She beamed. And that's when I knew. See, Barbara hated being called predictable. She prided herself on being spontaneous and full of surprises, despite the fact that she had ordered the same exact salad at every restaurant for the past decade. Calling her evolved was the kind of bait she couldn't resist. The problem was, evolution doesn't happen overnight. It happens gradually, painfully, over the course of years. Barbara's new interests weren't the result of a personal journey. They were the side effects of something else. Someone else. I just didn't know who yet. The confirmation came a week later, during what I now call the great existential crisis of Thursday night. I had been working late and came home around 9. Barbara was on the couch, dressed like she had spent the day being effortlessly elegant. She had a glass of wine in one hand, a book in the other. The book was upside down. "Hey," I said, walking in. She startled, nearly spilling her wine. "Oh. Hi. You're home." I squinted at her. Yeah?" She laughed, too loud. "Right. Of course. Because you live here." "Duh." I dropped my bag, studying her. "Everything okay?" "Me? Fine. Just relaxing. Reading." I pointed. "Your book is upside down." She glanced at it, then flipped it the right way. "Oh, you." She laughed again, a forced little thing. "You always notice the cutest details." Now, I'm not a detective, but even I could tell something was off. Barbara wasn't just acting weird. She was acting like a bad actor playing a woman who was totally, definitely not hiding something. So, I did what any self-respecting husband would do. I walked into the kitchen, grabbed a beer, and pretended like I was letting it go. "I was thinking we could do something this weekend," I said casually, popping the cap off. "Oh. Sure. What were you thinking?" I turned, leaning against the counter. "Maybe we could go to a baseball game." The way her face froze was magnificent. "A game," she said. "Like, in person?" "No, Barbara, I was thinking we could telepathically experience it from the comfort of our home." She forced a smile. I mean, I'd love to, but don't you think the seats would be expensive? Not really. I can grab a couple now. I pulled out my phone, pretending to browse tickets. Looks like the Dodgers are playing the Phillies. You know, since you've been so into baseball lately, I figured it'd be fun. She hesitated. Too much hesitation. Then, her face lit up. Oh, wait. I just remembered, I can't this weekend. I have that thing with, she paused, just a hair too long. Ashley. Ashley was her best friend. Ashley was also 7 months pregnant and could barely make it through a dinner without needing a nap. Ashley was not going to a baseball game. I took a slow sip of my beer, nodding. Ah. Got it. The thing with Ashley. Yes. Sorry. But you should totally go with one of your friends. Maybe I will. Great. She beamed, then reached for her wine. She took a long sip, then sighed dramatically. I love nights like this. Just the two of us, totally at peace. I nodded. Aha. And that's when I knew for sure. I still didn't have proof. I didn't have a name, a text message, or a shadowy figure caught in the act. But I had something better. I had a wife who was a terrible liar. Now, I just had to figure out what I was going to do about it. I don't consider myself a suspicious man, but when your wife suddenly develops a passion for things she previously ignored, it does something to you. It rewires your brain. Makes you start noticing things you otherwise wouldn't. Like how Barbara's phone never left her hand anymore. How she started laughing at texts, actual, full-blown laughing, like something was hilarious enough to warrant it. If she had been like this from the start, I wouldn't have thought twice. But this was a woman who once said I don't get memes with a straight face, and now she was suddenly amused by something so much she was snorting? Yeah, sure. I wasn't going to be one of those guys who went crazy trying to catch his wife slipping, though. I had dignity. A spine. A fully functional brain. And that's exactly why I did the only reasonable thing a husband in my position could do. I started paying attention. Not asking questions. Not accusing. Just watching. And I didn't have to wait long. Barbara had a routine. A predictable one. She was the kind of person who needed structure, a schedule. It was one of the things I used to appreciate about her. She never changed her route to work, never switched up her morning coffee order, never deviated from the plan unless there was a natural disaster or the internet went out. That's why it was so easy to notice when things started shifting. Like how she suddenly had meetings after work. Barbara never had meetings. She worked as an operations manager at some logistics company, and the most dramatic thing that ever happened in her office was when some intern forgot to book a conference room. It wasn't the kind of place that required after-hours problem solving. Yet, twice a week, she started staying late. And not just late, conveniently late. Like, oh, I just missed dinner late. Like, oh no, you're already asleep late. The first few times, I let it slide. I even played fool, acted like I believed her stories about inventory audits running over or unexpected software updates that required her supervision, despite the fact that she had never mentioned software even once in our entire marriage. I just nodded, smiled, and said, rough day, huh, every time she came home 2 hours after she should have. But by the fifth unexpected late night, I got an idea. I wasn't going to confront her. That was a rookie mistake. No, I was going to make her confront herself. So, on a Wednesday, her newly established late meeting day, I made a plan. Nothing fancy. Just a simple test. At 6:30 p.m., I drove to her office. Parked across the street. Watched the front doors. By 6:45, half the building had emptied out. By 7 o'clock, the place was nearly deserted. By 7:15, I saw her. She wasn't alone. There he was, standing next to her like they'd just wrapped up the world's most productive meeting. He was tall, clean-cut, had the general aura of a man who had never in his life been told no. I recognized him, but it took me a second to place where. Then it clicked. Brad. Brad from her office. Brad from the Christmas party. Brad from UGG, I can't stand that guy, he's so full of himself. That Brad. Interesting. I didn't do anything dramatic. Didn't storm over, didn't cause a scene. I just watched. Watched as they talked, as she laughed, as he reached out and touched her arm in a way that wasn't exactly friendly. Watched as she didn't pull away. I could have stayed longer, but I had all the information I needed. So I left. I wasn't going to accuse her yet. No, that would be too easy. Too expected. Instead, I was going to let her dig her own hole. Because the thing about liars is that they don't stop at just one lie. They build entire cities on top of them. And all I had to do was wait until hers collapsed. The opportunity presented itself 3 days later. It was Friday. We were supposed to have a date night, something we hadn't done in months. Barbara was all smiles about it, acting like she was the world's most devoted wife. "You're being so sweet lately," she said, running a hand over my arm while we waited for our food at some overpriced restaurant she had picked. "Yeah?" I said, sipping my drink. "Yeah. I feel like we're reconnecting. It's nice." I nodded, smiling. "Yeah. It's nice to actually spend time together." She beamed. I let it sit for a second, let her enjoy the moment. Then I set my drink down, tilted my head slightly, and said, "How was work on Wednesday, by the way?" She didn't even flinch. "Oh, exhausting. Those inventory reports were a nightmare." I leaned in. "Yeah? Who was in the meeting with you?" She hesitated. It was subtle, but I caught it. Then she smiled again, all confidence. "Oh, the usual. Anna, Greg, the warehouse guys." I nodded. "That's funny. Because I was actually near your office that night." The smile froze. "Oh? Yeah. Had a late meeting myself. Thought about swinging by to surprise you, but then I figured you'd be too busy." I paused, watching her face. "But you weren't there." A tiny flicker of panic crossed her eyes. "Of course I was," she said quickly. "I was probably just in the back." I let that hang in the air, then said, "Huh. Guess that explains why I saw you outside. With Brad." Silence. For a full 5 seconds, she didn't say a word. Didn't breathe. Then, just as I expected, she recovered. "Oh my God, Will. You're being ridiculous." I shrugged. "Am I?" "Yes. Brad just happened to leave at the same time as me, and we were talking about work. That's all it was." I nodded slowly, then reached for my drink again. "Right. Just a coincidence." "Yes," she said, crossing her arms. I took a sip, watching her over the rim of the glass. "Cool. So you won't mind if I ask Greg about it, then?" Her eyes flickered. "Because, I continued, setting the glass down, he's always been a chatty guy. I'm sure he'd be happy to confirm that you were in that meeting." More silence. Then she did exactly what I knew she would. She scoffed, rolled her eyes, and said, "I can't believe you're acting like this. It's like you want to start a fight." I grinned. "I don't want to start a fight. I just want the truth." And for the first time, Barbara had nothing to say. I let the silence stretch. Let her sit in it. Then I picked up my drink again, took another slow sip, and leaned back in my chair. "I'll tell you what, Barb," I said, smiling. "Let's just enjoy dinner." She didn't respond. I already knew she wouldn't. The thing about catching someone in a lie is that they never react the way you'd expect. You imagine there's going to be guilt, maybe an apology, possibly even tears. But most of the time, they double down. They get defensive, they turn the situation around, they act like you're the problem. It's an impressive skill, really. If I didn't know better, I'd say Barbara had been training for this moment her whole life. She spent the rest of dinner in full performance mode. Theatrical sighs, exaggerated exasperation, the occasional shaking of the head like she just couldn't believe I had the nerve to question her integrity. It would have been funny if it wasn't so obvious. When we got home, she went straight to our bedroom, dramatically kicking off her shoes like she had just walked through a war zone. "I don't know what's gotten into you," she said, flopping onto the bed like someone had just informed her of a great personal tragedy. I stood in the doorway, watching her. "You sure you don't?" She grabbed a pillow and smacked it into place. "I mean, come on, Will. Brad? Really? Do you even hear yourself?" Loud and clear. She let out another theatrical sigh, sitting up. "You're acting paranoid. And honestly? It's insulting." I nodded. "Yeah. I could see how that might be annoying for you." She narrowed her eyes. "Excuse me?" I shrugged, leaning against the doorframe. "You have to admit, though, it's interesting. The sudden late nights, the meetings, the new interests. If I was writing a bad crime show, you'd be the world's least subtle suspect." She let out a humorless laugh. "Wow. So now I'm a suspect? What's next? Are you going to interrogate me under a bare light bulb? Would that make you confess?" Her jaw tightened, and for a second, I saw it, the flicker of actual panic. It was quick, barely there, but I caught it. She grabbed her phone off the nightstand, swiping at the screen with unnecessary force. "I don't have time for this." "Oh, yeah. You must be exhausted from all that honest, respectable work you've been doing." She shot me a look, the kind of look that usually came before a speech about how exhausting it was to live with someone so immature. I was fully prepared for it. I even had a counter-argument locked and loaded. But before she could launch into it, her phone buzzed. And she flinched. Not the normal, casual "oh, my phone is ringing" kind of flinch. No, this was something else. The kind of reaction you have when you see a name on the screen that you really don't want the person next to you to see. Now, I'm not a genius, but I'm also not stupid. Barbara, however, apparently thought I was. She turned the phone face down so fast it was like she was playing in the championship round of Hide the Evidence. I raised an eyebrow. "You gonna get that?" "It's just spam," she said quickly. Too quickly. I smiled. "You sure? Could be an important business meeting calling." She forced a laugh. "Oh my God, Will. Enough." She had two options here. One, she could grab the phone, turn it over, and prove it was spam. Easy. Two, she could keep it face down and hope I was fool enough to let it go. She chose option two. Fascinating. I nodded. Got it. She stood up. "I'm taking a shower." Of course she was. A classic avoid the conversation maneuver. I didn't stop her. I just watched as she grabbed a change of clothes, practically sprinted into the bathroom, and shut the door a little too hard. A few seconds later, I heard the water running. I turned my attention back to the phone. Now, I wasn't the kind of guy who snooped. Not usually. But when your wife is acting guiltier than a kid caught stealing candy, you start making exceptions. I walked over to the nightstand and picked it up. Locked. Obviously. I glanced at the bathroom door. Still closed. The sound of running water filling the room. I held the phone up. Took a breath. Then tapped the screen. She used a fingerprint lock. I shook my head, letting out a small laugh. Amateur. Barbara was many things. Secretive? Yes. Unfaithful? Almost definitely. But smart? Not in this particular moment. I pressed her finger against the sensor. And just like that, I was in. Now, I didn't want to be the guy who scrolled through his wife's phone like a deranged detective. But let's be real, when you get this far, you don't stop. I opened her messages. And there it was. Not Brad.
Not some mysterious unknown number.
No, this was worse.
It was Stephanie. Stephanie, her work friend.
The one who had allegedly just gotten out of a bad relationship. The one who had been so busy with self-care that she couldn't even make it to our last dinner party. Stephanie, who had texted Barbara.
"Did you tell him yet?" And Barbara's response, just an hour ago. "Not yet. I will soon. Don't freak out."
I sat down on the bed, staring at the screen.
Ha! Stephanie, huh? Interesting. Very, very interesting.
Barbara didn't come out of the shower for 20 minutes, which gave me plenty of time to think. Normally, I wasn't the kind of guy who sat around planning revenge like some cartoon villain, but let's be honest, this wasn't normal. This was my wife sneaking around behind my back, texting her work friend Stephanie like they were part of some top-secret operation.
And I was supposed to just sit here and wait for her to tell me whatever nonsense excuse she was cooking up? Yeah. Not happening.
I put her phone back exactly where I found it, face down, like a good little unsuspecting husband. Then I walked into the living room and started making a few adjustments to our shared digital life. First, I opened our laptop. The one Barbara barely touched because, according to her, phones were just more convenient.
Convenient for her, sure.
But also convenient for me, because it meant she had no idea that our iCloud was synced up perfectly with her messages. I pulled up the text thread with Stephanie.
Barbara's last message, "Not yet. I will soon. Don't freak out."
Stephanie's response, which had come in while Barbara was busy washing off the guilt in the bathroom, "Hurry up.
This is getting too messy. He's gonna find out." Oh, Stephanie.
You poor, simple woman. I smiled and started typing.
Don't worry. I'll handle it. Send. Stephanie responded immediately. What do you mean handle it?
I took a deep breath, stretched my fingers like I was about to compose a masterpiece, and typed. I mean, don't worry about William.
He's not as fool as we thought. Send. The little dots popped up.
Stephanie was typing, deleting, typing again.
I could practically hear the panic through the screen. Finally, she landed on. Wait, what? Did he say something? I waited. Let her sweat. Then. Barbara, WTF is going on? I grinned.
Then I closed the laptop, stood up, and casually walked back toward the bedroom like nothing had happened. Barbara finally emerged, dressed in an oversized t-shirt she had owned for at least 10 years, hair damp, expression neutral.
But I knew better.
There was tension in her shoulders, in the way she avoided looking directly at me. She was bracing for something, probably still trying to figure out if I had actually bought her whole Brad is just a coworker nonsense.
I decided to make it easy for her.
I was thinking, I said, stretching out on the bed like I had not a single care in the world, we should do something fun this weekend.
She blinked. Fun? Yeah. You and me. No distractions. Just us. I watched her face closely. She didn't look relieved. She looked suspicious. Oh, she said. That's nice. Nice. Nice.
This woman had the nerve to act like she wasn't panicking on the inside.
Like she wasn't sitting on whatever secret she and Stephanie were keeping. Yeah, I said. I figure we could use some quality time, you know?
After all, things have been a little off lately.
That did it.
Her eyes flicked toward her phone, just for a second, but I caught it.
I smiled.
But first, I continued, I was actually going to stop by your office tomorrow. Her head snapped up so fast I thought she might get whiplash.
My office? Yeah. I thought I'd bring you lunch.
I shrugged, casual, easy.
Since you've been working so hard and all. I figured you'd appreciate it.
She opened her mouth, then closed it.
Then opened it again. Tomorrow? Yeah. Around noon. Should I bring something for Brad, too?
I swear, I felt the way her soul tried to leave her body. She said, grasping for words.
I mean, you don't have to do that. Oh, I want to, I said. I mean, unless you don't want me to? She hesitated. It's just, tomorrow's probably not a good day. Meetings. Busy schedule. I might not even be at my desk. Right, I said, nodding like I believed her. Makes sense. Can't have me just showing up unannounced, huh? She let out a nervous laugh. Exactly. I smiled, stood up, stretched. Well, in that case, I'll just surprise you another day. Barbara didn't say anything. She just nodded, the same way someone nods when they're trying to hold together a house of cards that's about to collapse. Perfect. The thing about catching a liar is that you don't need to expose them right away. You just need to let them know you're onto them. You need to plant that seed of paranoia, let it fester, let them unravel under their own guilt. And Barbara? Oh, she was already unraveling. I climbed into bed, stretched my arms behind my head, and let out a satisfied sigh. This was going to be fun. Barbara woke up looking like someone who had just spent the entire night trying to solve a crime she secretly committed. I, on the other hand, woke up feeling refreshed, well-rested, and absolutely thrilled to continue my little game. I had given her exactly what she needed, a false sense of control. By casually bringing up her job, her meetings, and good old Brad, I had made her feel like she still had time to cover her tracks. She was scrambling. I could see it in the way she kept glancing at her phone during breakfast, like she was waiting for some emergency escape plan to appear in a text. She cleared her throat, forcing a smile. You know, I was thinking, maybe we should go out this weekend after all. Get out of town. Just us. A last-minute distraction maneuver. Classic. I took a sip of my coffee, keeping my expression neutral. Oh yeah? What brought that on? She shrugged, all casual, all nothing to see here. Just thought it would be nice. We could use some time away, right? I hummed, nodding. That does sound nice. But you know what I was thinking? She tensed just slightly. What? I was thinking we should have people over instead. A little get-together. Keep it small. Maybe invite some of your work friends. If I had been holding a scoreboard, Barbara's expression would have been the equivalent of an own goal. She laughed, too fast, too forced. Oh, I don't know if everyone's free. I shrugged. That's okay. I'll text them myself. Her face went pale. I let the silence stretch. Let her feel the weight of it. Then I grabbed my phone and, right in front of her, started a group message. Me, hey guys. Thinking of having a little get-together this Saturday. Just a few close friends. Barbara's work crew, you're obviously invited. Let me know who can make it. And then, just to twist the knife a little deeper, I added Brad and Stephanie to the chat. Barbara's phone buzzed immediately. She grabbed it like it was a live grenade, scrolling frantically. I took another sip of my coffee, watching. Waiting. Stephanie was the first to respond. Stephanie, oh wow. This is kind of last minute, huh? I smiled. Oh, Stephanie. You have no idea. Then Brad chimed in. Brad, sounds great. Count me in. I almost laughed out loud at how fast Barbara's fingers started typing. Barbara, actually, this weekend might not be the best. William, we should talk first before making plans. I set my phone down and gave her my best innocent look. Why? What's there to talk about? She glared at me. You can't just invite people like that. Sure I can. They're your friends, aren't they? Her lips pressed into a thin line. She was seconds away from snapping, but she couldn't. Not yet. Not without showing her hand. I stood up, stretched, and patted her shoulder. I'll grab some stuff for the party later today. Should be fun.
Then I walked out, leaving her sitting there, gripping her phone like it was the only thing keeping her from physically combusting.
Saturday arrived faster than Barbara's excuses could keep up. By the time the first guests arrived, she looked like a woman on the verge of collapse. Every time the doorbell rang, she flinched. Every time Brad spoke, she barely looked at him. Stephanie, meanwhile, was practically vibrating with tension.
She kept shooting Barbara looks, like they were in some kind of secret spy movie where one wrong move meant immediate capture. I played the role of oblivious host perfectly.
Laughing, chatting, making sure everyone had a drink.
Then, once everyone was settled, I turned to Barbara with my best "oh, by the way" face.
I almost forgot, I said, clapping my hands.
Since we have the whole gang here, I figured it'd be fun to share a little surprise. Barbara froze. Stephanie's drink nearly slipped out of her hand. Brad, bless his clueless heart, just grinned. I pulled my phone out of my pocket, tapped the screen a few times, and then turned the volume all the way up. Barbara's messages, the ones I had conveniently forwarded to myself before deleting them from her phone, played out loud for everyone to hear.
Stephanie, did you tell him yet? Barbara, not yet. I will soon. Don't freak out. Stephanie, hurry up. This is getting too messy. He's gonna find out. Silence. I looked up. Barbara's face was white as a sheet. Stephanie looked like she was about to pass out. And Brad? Oh, Brad was catching up fast. What, he said slowly, is this? Barbara opened her mouth, then closed it. Then opened it again. It's not what it sounds like. I raised an eyebrow. Really? Because it sounds exactly like what I think it is. Stephanie made a noise like a dying fish. Barbara, what did you do?
And that was when Brad stood up, chair scraping loudly against the floor. You've been lying to me, he said, voice sharp. Barbara turned to him, panicked.
Wait, you? Ah. And there it was. The moment of absolute, catastrophic realization. Brad had not been the guy. Barbara had been sneaking around with someone else entirely.
And Brad, poor clueless Brad, had just found out at the same time I did.
I let out a low whistle. Well, this is awkward.
Barbara's eyes darted around the room, desperate for an escape.
I can explain. No, I said, shaking my head. You really, really can't.
The silence stretched.
Heavy. Unbearable. Then, finally, Stephanie let out a weak, bitter laugh. Oh my God, she muttered. This is spectacularly bad. Barbara turned to her, wide-eyed. Stephanie. Nope. Stephanie held up a hand. I want zero part of this.
Brad, still standing, still fuming, looked around the room like he had just woken up in a horror movie. Then, without another word, he grabbed his jacket and walked out. Barbara turned to me, eyes pleading.
Will. I held up my phone. I'll be emailing you the divorce papers tomorrow. Her face crumpled. I smiled. Hope the meetings were worth it.
And with that, I turned and walked out the door, leaving her in the mess she had created.
Barbara didn't try to stop me as I walked out the door. Probably because she knew there was nothing left to say.
Or maybe because she was too busy trying to figure out how the entire foundation of her double life had just been ripped apart in the most humiliating way possible.
Either way, I didn't look back.
I stepped outside, took a deep breath, and for the first time in months, I felt something close to peace. That peace lasted about 24 hours. The next evening, right when I was considering whether or not I should celebrate my newfound freedom by reorganizing my closet, my phone rang. Not a random number. Not some mysterious text from an unknown sender. No, this was Barbara. I considered ignoring it. Let her stew. Let her sit in the wreckage of her choices. But curiosity got the best of me. I picked up, putting her on speaker just in case she tried to pull some dramatic nonsense. William. Her voice was tired, strained. The kind of voice someone uses when they're hoping you've magically forgotten every horrible thing they did.
I didn't say anything. Just waited. She took a deep breath. I
think we should talk.
Talk? I repeated, leaning back in my chair. About what? Your favorite baseball team? Maybe the deep emotional connection you and Brad never had? She let out an exhausted sigh. Come on, Will. Don't be like this. Be like what? I said. Rational? Logical? Not interested in a conversation that benefits literally no one?
There was a pause. I could practically hear her trying to figure out what approach to take. I messed up, she finally said. I know that. But you put me in a position where I couldn't even explain myself. I let out a short laugh. Barbara. I gave you a year to explain yourself. Instead, you gave me late nights, bad excuses, and a friendship with Stephanie that clearly wasn't built on shared book club interests. I panicked, she snapped. It wasn't supposed to be like this. Yeah, I said. That's the thing about consequences, Barbara. They don't really care about how you thought things were supposed to go. She went quiet again. Then, softer, can we at least try to have a civil conversation? I tilted my head. Sure. You go first. Explain it. The cheating, the lying, the texts. Make it all sound reasonable. More silence. Then, finally, it wasn't serious. I laughed, actually laughed. Oh, okay. You weren't serious about sneaking around behind my back? Lying to my face? That was just a casual hobby? I mean, I never planned to leave you, she said, voice defensive now. It was just things got complicated. Barbara, I said, I literally caught you mid-complication. Are you going to let me talk, or are you just going to throw sarcastic comments at me the whole time? I thought about it. Probably the second one. She exhaled sharply. You weren't supposed to find out like this. I shook my head. Oh yeah, my bad. I should have waited for you to deliver a well-rehearsed, heavily edited version of the truth at a time that was more convenient for you. Her voice dropped into that frustrated tone she always used when she wasn't getting her way. You're impossible. And you're divorced, I replied. Well, not yet. But soon. I already sent everything to the lawyer. You should get the paperwork by the end of the week. That shut her up. A long pause stretched between us. I could almost feel the wheels turning in her head. Just like that, she said finally. I nodded, even though she couldn't see me. Just like that. She laughed, but there was no humor in it. I don't know why I expected anything different from you. That makes two of us. She didn't have a comeback for that. For a moment, I wondered if she was going to say something else. If she was going to beg, or cry, or try to rewrite history. But she didn't. She just let out one last exhausted breath, and then the line went dead. I stared at my phone for a second, then set it down. And that was that. No dramatic final confrontation. No attempt to twist things around in her favor. Just a quiet, defeated exit from a conversation that was never going to change anything. A week later, the divorce papers were officially in motion. A month after that, I moved out. Not because I had to. Barbara was the one who ended up crashing at Stephanie's for a while, but because I wanted a fresh start. I found a decent apartment, set up my own place, and for the first time in years, I wasn't sharing my space with someone who was secretly texting her work friend about me like I was an obstacle in my own marriage. Barbara didn't fight me on anything. She didn't try to negotiate, didn't try to drag things out. Maybe she was too embarrassed. Maybe she was too tired. Either way, the divorce went through smoothly, and before I knew it, my marriage was legally over. A few months later, I ran into Brad. Not on purpose, just one of those weird, small world moments where you turn a corner and suddenly you're face to face with the guy you once falsely accused of sleeping with your wife. He looked at me.
I looked at him.
Then he shook his head and said, "Man, I really thought she was different."
I shrugged. Yeah, well. So did I. And that was the end of that conversation. As for Barbara? I have no idea. I don't check up on her. Don't ask mutual friends about her.
Don't go digging for updates like some guy who secretly hopes she's miserable.
I don't care. That's the best part of moving on. You stop caring. And honestly, it feels great. Thanks for watching. Please hit the like button and rate the story in the comments.